A new podcast examines the perils of intense meditation. And there were a few articles that kind of came out in around the same time talking about how meditation itself might be a dangerous activity if, you overdo it. You get it like anything else, right? You overdo anything and it becomes a dangerous thing. Well, I'd never heard specifically them say, anybody really say, and this may be just because I'm a knucklehead and not really into the meditation bit, but I should be, to be honest. But I hadn't heard anybody specifically say that, it's dangerous or could be dangerous in some capacity. But the more I thought about it, kind of letting this just idle on the back burner, I was like, okay, maybe, just maybe this is something where we're, as I'm calling this tonight, the Icarus syndrome, flying too close to the shadow. Okay, that's the idea of why the idea of let's say mindfulness, too much mindfulness, is basically sort of gobbling up your space to live in the real world, your space to kind of let all that mindfulness, all the meditation, all the things that you do, not really sort of culminate in some change or culminate in some regular world aspect that's not the rest of this, the woo-woo new age type stuff. And, I'm fine with the woo-woo new age stuff. Me, I talk about all kinds of wild stuff. But now this particular thing, NPR, these links are going to be in the description. Of course, I encourage you to read these in full if you're interested in the ideas. So this one in particular is talking about a four episode podcast series, and they're talking about meditation and mindfulness. But they're talking about how it's this particular version could be dangerous, and they're talking about vipassana meditation. I don't even know how to say it. It's let's see, here it is, right there. There it is. Okay, there we go. And so it's a practice. Okay, here we go. So this particular one. So vipassana is the oldest of Buddhist meditation practices used for enhancing mindfulness. The method comes from the, more big words, the Foundations of Mindfulness, a discourse attributed to the Buddha himself. In Pali, P-A-L-I, Pali, an ancient language of Buddhism, the word vipassana means seeing things as they really are, or the literal translation is special seeing. Okay, fine, right? Great place to start. Often the term vipassana, again, if I'm saying this wrong, because like they said, don't make fun of people who mispronounce things. It's because they learned them reading them. Anyway, I love that saying because it is true. But anyway, so often the term vipassana meditation is used interchangeably with mindfulness meditation. But vipassana is more specific. It involves observing your thoughts and emotions as they are, without judging or dwelling on them. Okay, I mean, I'm on board. This is fantastic. Seems like a very, very good thing, right? Well, I guess this particular talking about this podcast series, and of course, NPR is pushing this because NPR is going to do what NPR does. It may be one of their actually podcast series. But so anyway, so they talk about meditation and mindfulness, again, all the health benefits, which we all know. This is the stuff that I was like, okay, yeah, no kidding. This makes a ton of sense, right? Meditation and mindfulness have been known to help process trauma, manage anxiety, improve eating habits, ease chronic pain, all the rest of the stuff, all the rest of the good stuff that we're all really talked about with this. And even maybe sort of bring yourself into sort of these altered states of consciousness in some ways, okay? Which, fine, that's cool. I mean, this is all good. But this individual interviewed nearly 24 people who attended this particular retreat in different countries, including the UK, United States, France, India, and Australia. Now, this is where it gets weird, because what they were doing is as part of these retreats, they were forcing people into like 12 hours or 10 hours of silence, silent meditation, only 2 vegan meals a day, very Buddha-esque type stuff, right? To sort of force yourself, or force the person, the retreat individual, into a I don't know, like a forced stasis, okay? Which is weird. I mean, this is the type of thing that should probably come a little more naturally than like, okay, well, you paid for it, so we're going to give you all the meditation you can handle. Sit your ass down, shut your ass up, eat this bowl of gruel, and we'll be back in 10 hours. Don't say a word, right? And I'm just kidding. But it kind of sounds like that a little bit as well. So at some point, right, you're doing this, it's causing problems. It's causing mental breakdowns. It's doing all manner of weird things, okay? And even to the point where I think a person or two that were part of these retreats took their life. So, I mean, not during, but sort of in the fractured psyche after the event, in the weeks and months leading after. Like I said, I didn't listen to the podcast series. As you know, I don't have time to do that stuff, but I did find this fascinating when I first saw this back in March 31st of 2024. Tucked it away and was like, okay, that's pretty cool, right? That's neat. I do wonder if there's something to this idea here. Okay. So then today I saw this, or was it today? I think it's today. Yeah. So now this is even more strange as these, again, like I said, these ideas, again, months apart, kind of come together, at least in my mind. Now tell me if I'm wrong here. As usual, I'm probably wrong because that's just what I do. I excel at being wrong, but this is from Neuroscience News, and check this out. Altered states of consciousness are more common than believed in mind-body practices. Now, mind-body practices, right, this is one of those things, back to meditation, different ways to do this. Of course, we talk about sort of getting into the zone of the flow, the rhythm, whatever it is. And this could be, sort of a mindfulness exercise while you're playing basketball. I mean, it could be all manner of things. It doesn't have to be specific, direct meditation as a result. So a little bit from this, check this out. So a new study finds that altered states of consciousness, like those experienced during meditation, are more common than previously thought. 45% of respondents reported experiencing these ASCs at least once, often leading to positive outcomes. Okay, it's like, wow, that's kind of cool. I do wonder, like, how often we sort of snap in and out of this, our consciousness or quasi-conscious state or whatever, however you define these things. And maybe we are having these actual, altered states. Maybe this is part of being human, and we're constantly doing this stuff all the time. I don't know. But anyway, so 45% of respondents reported experiencing these non-pharmacologically induced ASCs. Again, no drugs, all right? No drugs. No beer, no maybe juice, no nothing. Okay, and these particular altered states of consciousness are associated with both positive and negative well-being outcomes. And so this is where I was like, wait a minute, that reminded me of this thing I found months ago. So I found it and was like, okay, so let's compare. And here you go. Now this is where this starts to get weird and get dark. So many who experience negative outcomes do not seek help. Okay. Now, specifically with these mind-body practices, these altered states of consciousness, which means, of course, there are a small subset of individuals that are, what would you say, actually having these out-of-body experiences through these mind-body practices. Again, it could be a transcendental basketball session or something, right? I mean, I don't know how this actually fits, but this study suggests that we're doing this stuff all the time, kind of having these out-of-body experiences of sorts. Okay, and again, how weird does it get? How high does it go? Are we getting into the Monroe Institute type of stuff with the OBEs? Who knows? But notice and recognize the two things that these two articles have in common is that it's talking about negative aspects of mindfulness and negative aspects of actual meditation itself. Okay, and it got me thinking. You know me, I'm like, wait a minute now. Okay, so if that's the case, why? Is there such a thing as too much mindfulness? Is there such a thing as too much of this meditative aspect of life, without actually going out there and finding ways to sort of shake it out, to live life, to do something different? I don't know. But I do know that, again, months apart, these two articles seem to make some sense in that this is sort of resurfacing in this new, well, whatever you want to call it, this mind-body practice of actually altered states of consciousness. Now, what does it mean? How does it get dark? We're talking about altered states of consciousness, but this mind-body practice. And the weird part is, like I said, I started doing a little digging. And sure enough, with all of this, there are dangers of meditation. There is such a thing as too much introspection. There is such a thing, supposedly, again, like I said, I'm not the guy that's the arbiter of anybody's truth. Again, barely my own, as I say. And so, but I was surprised to find more and more and more. So Psychology Today, Dangers of Meditation. This other one, Too Much Mindfulness Can Worsen Your Mental Health. Can meditation cause you harm? on and on and on. And I was a little surprised because this seems to be one of those things that doesn't get really any kind of blowback in terms of being something that's negative for you. Okay. So what was on my mind as part of it? Well, the first part that was strange to me was that the altered states of consciousness that are more common than we ever expected. Now, are we doing this all the time? Is this something that's not necessary to even have a meditative state or mind-body practices, as they say? But that seems strange because, as I described previously, playing basketball is kind of a mind-body practice. Getting into the flow or the zone is sort of that maybe altered state of consciousness, as we've talked about many times in the past. But how does it fit into the larger context here? And how come this stuff might actually be dangerous if you do too much of it? So, of course, what I was thinking is a couple things came to mind, specifically the story of Daedalus and Icarus in of course, Greek mythology. And, the story, Daedalus, the father of Icarus, is a famed inventor and creates a set of wings to fly with beeswax and the wings, the birds of feathers, and crafts a beautiful pair of wings. Well, his precocious and fearless son, Icarus, ends up getting the wings and takes off. And for the test flight, clearly Dad's like, no, come on, stop. And it's working. It's working. He's actually flying. He's flying. And it's amazing. And it's like, wow, humans can fly. Well, he goes higher. He goes higher. He goes higher yet. And of course, what happens, as you know, if you were familiar with Greek mythology, well, the wax that held the wings together, well, it begins to melt, because he's now suddenly flying too close to the sun. Now, of course, it's an allegory, a metaphor for many things, for, kind of punching above your pay grade, the original FAFO, which is, F around and find out, okay? And so in this sense, well, maybe this is exactly what's happening, meaning that too much of anything can be a bad thing. We all know that. Look, water is good for you. Crystal clear water from a mountain spring or something. But if you drink 22 gallons of water every single day, it'll kill you. And so that becomes the problem of moderation, and back to the Stoic mindset a little bit. But so it brought to mind that, and specifically not just because of flying too close to the sun was of course horrific. The wings came apart. Spoiler alert for a several thousand-year-old story that everybody knows. Icarus comes crashing down to his death, and it is a sad day indeed. Okay. And so it is, of course, eclipsed by the fact that now you think Daedalus is ever going to replicate these wings again? No, I mean, it caused the death of his son, though inadvertently, okay? And so the reason I'm describing this is because I was thinking about the same thing and how this fits into, well, maybe not the sun, but in a meditative aspect, is it possible that we're coming just a bit too close to the shadow itself? Or shadow self. And again, what was it? Nietzsche, I guess, said, be careful when fighting monsters. Is a bad paraphrase. That you stare into the abyss stares back, and you may become a monster yourself. Now, I wonder if these two same ideas, if similar ideas, fit into this meditative aspect of the perils of intense meditation. And not just that suddenly we're having these situations where these altered states of consciousness are far more common than we ever expected. And I've got some ideas, of course, got some wild things to consider here, but because that's really what I do. But that's the question tonight. Now, what do you know about this specifically? And I have a hard time believing it, to be perfectly honest, because, and I'll say it this way, because again, I'm not a doctor, all the rest of this stuff, all the disclaimers apply. But it seems to me like introspection's a good thing, okay? Except with the caveat that too much of anything can be bad. As I said, crystal clear water, if you drink a ton of it, too much of it too quickly in succession, and don't, go do other things, it'll wash all the minerals out of your body and you'll die. And so, well, what is going on with this? And is it possible to do too much introspection, too much of this mind-body practice, and altered states of consciousness that bring us too close to the shadow? And that becomes exactly where my mind is at tonight with this idea. And it gets even more weird because I found some other articles that suggest, well, we'll get to that a little bit later because I don't want to blow all the fun stuff right out of the gate. But that becomes a question. So here's several questions to get us going. So specifically, what do you know about the meditation? do you think too much of it can be detrimental to anybody? Okay, that's the first question. And of course, what do you know about meditation itself? The second thing is, how come when this stuff kind of starts to manifest in the zeitgeist, which it is, again, like I said, now we're getting some of these ideas that not just altered states of consciousness are kind of more prevalent than we ever dreamed, but also that meditation itself, which almost always gets a positive rap, is now getting a negative rap. What is that? Is that some sort of a propaganda aspect of trying to shoot down the new age, mind body wellness industry? Look, I don't know. Is it propaganda? Is it something else? And what are we encountering that's dangerous becomes the wild problem here. Because again, I think that if we look into ourselves deeply enough, you'll find monsters. There are certainly monsters there as part of being human. We talked a little bit about that last night. We talk a little bit about that all the time, because it is very specific to what it is to be human. And that's what this show is really about at the most fundamental level. And so if there be monsters and we encounter them, is it possible that we're unleashing them by staring them in the eyes in spaces, well, where we should not? And that becomes the question. And I don't know the answer. As usual, look, I'm not here to preach to anybody or tell anybody anything that, again, doctor stuff. I'm not a doctor, all the rest, right? All the disclaimers apply, and these are just ideas. But this one was new to me. And it seems like if you combine a couple of the few ideas here, that suddenly things are a little different than we ever expected. Now, specifically with this first one, which I found today, the altered states of consciousness, more common than believed, meaning that what's happening with that? Do you think it is part of the quickening, part of the age of Aquarius, like we always talk about, part of these, I don't know, some sort of awakening? Maybe it's something that the internet age is kind of bringing about, that maybe we're more mindful in a lot of ways because of it, because of, the information, even the trolls and the just horrific people out there that just, won't let things go and want to argue and fight and be stupid on the interwebs. Like what is going on here? And it almost feels like there is a version of the quickening, that old Art Bell quickening or whatever else, however you want to sort of term it in that aspect. And I don't know. I do have some wild ideas, which we'll get to. And don't worry, it's going to get as weird as it gets because, well, this is all stacked to be as weird as it gets tonight. But I'm calling it the Icarus syndrome, of course, flying too close to the shadow, because we're just inverting the idea. And it's not the sun this time. It is, of course, flying too close to your shadow self. And is it possible by staring that shadow self in the eyes, you're inviting it into the real world? And that about puts us where we need to be, and that's what's on my mind tonight. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like I said, this was a new one to me. I know the new age, mindfulness. It's a massive thing. Like you go to a bookstore and you look at the sections there of all the things about self-help, right? I mean, there's so much, and a lot of it has to do with not just religious type stuff, but ancient Buddhist type stuff. And well, yeah, I don't have to tell you. You guys know all about it. But I'm just saying, it feels to me like there's something happening here, at least in this philosophical construct itself and sort of these ideas. And, well, what exactly is that thing? And, yeah, there you go. That does exactly that. And we are, of course, taking your calls if you want to be part of the show tonight. The number to call is 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. This is Troubled Minds. I'm Michael Strange. Don't go anywhere. More after the break. We got it's like Derek the Night Stalker and your calls as well. I don't know. This is a weird one for me because I think too much of anything can be bad, but is too much mindfulness also a bad thing without sort of just going out in the real world and letting it become, well, maybe manifest in good ways? I don't know. Is it possible that not just altered states of consciousness are more common than we ever imagined, but also that this idea of a mind-body practice or what are they calling this? A meditative action can actually be negative, be a detriment. Too much mindfulness can be a negative thing. Now, again, like I said, I've never heard this recently, until very recently. And then I dug into it a little bit, and it seems like there's some basis to this. Now, as I said earlier, and I think as part of the larger discussion here, surely too much of anything can be a bad thing, even if it's something that's very good for you. And so that becomes problematic here in terms of what this looks like and why this might be bad. Now, introspection, I think, is at the heart of what makes us human. We sometimes don't want to face the shadow within. Sometimes we do. Sometimes it's a lifelong quest to sort of maybe not conquer it, but tame it or learn to live with it or all the rest of these things. But in some sense, is it possible that we're letting this sucker out? And you know what I mean. And that becomes, I think, the darkness within that should stay within and should not escape into the realm of the world itself.